Today we're diving into some legal documents that you sent our way. It's a lawsuit filed by Gerard Williams, and it really shines a light on online defamation and cyber harassment, especially on platforms like Facebook and YouTube. This case also raises some really interesting questions about jurisdiction in our increasingly digital age.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Williams is suing 4 individuals, Doan Pham, also known as Derek Pham, Thuong Doan, Nguyen, also known as Doan Nguyen, and Nuta. He's claiming they coordinated a smear campaign against him and his wife.
Right.
And to help us break down all these legal twists and turns, we have expert speaker here with us. Expert speaker, what jumps out at you when you look at this case?
I think what's most fascinating about this case is it really highlights how traditional legal concepts are being challenged in the online world, especially when you're dealing with something like defamation and jurisdiction when social media is involved.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. This lawsuit revolves around statements made online about a separate legal case between Williams and Dam Vinh Hung, a very famous Vietnamese singer. So it seems that Hung was injured at Williams's house, and he's now suing him for those injuries. And Williams is claiming that these 4 defendants that we just named, who are all allegedly close to Hung, launched an online smear campaign against him in retaliation.
Right.
And he's claiming that because they used platforms like Facebook and YouTube to interact with and encourage a large Vietnamese American audience in Texas,
Right.
the court there should have jurisdiction over them, even though 2 of the defendants don't even live in Texas.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how the court actually rules, but essentially, Williams' legal team is arguing that the defendants' online activity, specifically directed towards Texas residents, was enough to establish a strong connection to the state to justify a Texas court hearing the case.
So essentially, they're saying that even though they're not physically in Texas, their online actions created a strong enough connection to Texas to establish jurisdiction.
Precisely. And this could have major implications for other cases involving online actions that cross state lines.
Now, the documents you shared with us are filled with screenshots of Facebook posts and YouTube videos, some of which contain some pretty shocking accusations.
Oh, yeah.
We see things like accusations of insurance fraud, personal attacks, threats of violence. There are even transcripts of 21 vulgar voicemails that they say they received after sending cease and desist letters to the defendants. So it sounds like things got pretty heated.
Oh, absolutely.
So if the court does decide it has jurisdiction, what is Williams hoping to achieve with this lawsuit?
Well, it seems like he's seeking several things based on what you've shared. First, he's looking for financial compensation for the damage to his reputation and the invasion of his privacy. And perhaps even more importantly, he's requesting a temporary injunction from the court, which would essentially silence the defendants and prevent them from posting anything else about him while the case is pending.
Wow.
So this type of injunction is usually granted when there is a significant risk of ongoing harm. And it seems like his legal team is really working hard to show that the defendant's actions are causing real damage.
So he's not just looking for financial compensation, he's also trying to shut down the conversation. Entirely.
Yeah.
This brings up a big question. Where do we draw the line between free speech and harmful online conduct?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question, and it's something that courts are grappling with more and more these days. While the First Amendment protects our right to free speech, it doesn't give people a free pass to defame or harass others. So the court really has to examine the specific online actions of defendants and determine whether they cross that line.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some of the specifics. You mentioned that the lawsuit stems from statements made online about a separate case between Williams and Dam Vinh Hung. So what exactly happened between the 2 of them?
Well, it all started back in February of 2024. Dam Vinh Hung was at a party at Gerard Williams's home, and during the evening, he fell into a concrete fountain and suffered a severe leg injury. I mean, it was so severe that it ultimately resulted in the amputation of 3 of his toes.
Ouch.
Yeah, very painful. As a result of that injury, Hung's now suing Williams for $15 million in damages in the Superior Court of Orange County, California. But that lawsuit is still ongoing.
And this is what sparked the online defamation and harassment that Williams is now suing these 4 individuals over.
That's right. It all stems from this initial incident.
Okay, so it's one lawsuit stemming from a personal injury that leads to a whole other lawsuit about online attacks. The plot thickens.
Yeah.
It looks like Hung is claiming that Williams misused the fountain as like a stage and table, and that caused him to fall.
Right.
But then Williams is denying any responsibility. And in a really strange twist, he is presenting a CD signed by Hung as evidence of their close friendship.
Interesting.
Like proof that Hung wouldn't hold him responsible for an accident. It's a very interesting detail in the case.
It is.
And this is where the defendants come in. Williams is claiming that they're all close to Hung and launched this whole online campaign to pressure him to settle, regardless of what actually happened that night.
It's like they're trying to influence the outcome of that personal injury to him.
Exactly. And they're alleging that Doan Pham, also known as Derek Pham, used his online platform to urge his viewers to attack and harass Williams and his wife, going so far as to even encourage somebody to protest outside of Williams' workplace.
Wow.
Now, you mentioned earlier how this case could set a precedent for jurisdiction in the digital age, especially regarding Pham and Doan, who don't even live in Texas.
Right.
How strong is that argument legally?
Well, to establish jurisdiction over somebody who lives outside of the state, the court has to be convinced that the person purposefully directed their actions towards residents of that state.
Okay.
So in this case, they're arguing that by specifically mentioning Texas, encouraging viewers to take action against Williams in Texas.
Right.
And interacting with Texas residents online, the defendants effectively brought themselves under the jurisdiction of Texas law.
Now, you mentioned the minimum contacts argument earlier. Can you break that down into plain English for us?
Sure. So basically, minimum contacts means that a person must have had enough interaction with a state. That it's fair for them to be sued there.
Got it.
So Williams' legal team is arguing that the defendants' online actions targeted at Texas residents created those minimum contacts.
Even though they don't actually live there.
Exactly.
It's almost as if they anticipated this question of jurisdiction and very meticulously documented every single interaction.
Yeah. They've included chat logs, comments, mentions of Texas during live streams. They were very thorough.
Very strategic.
Yeah, to show that the defendants were actively engaging with and encouraging a Texas audience. It wasn't just random. They were directly communicating with people in Texas.
They're even citing a Supreme Court case, Calder v. Jones, as a precedent.
Oh, interesting.
That case involved a National Enquirer article about an actress. And even though the article was written and published outside of California, the Supreme Court ruled that California courts had jurisdiction because the article was intentionally targeted at a California audience and caused harm there.
Right.
So it seems like they're using that case to argue that just like with that National Enquirer article, the defendants in this case knew they were targeting a Texas audience and therefore should be subject to Texas law. A clever argument, and it really highlights how the internet has blurred traditional jurisdictional lines.
It really has. And this case could really set a precedent for how we handle online behavior and jurisdiction in the digital age. I mean, it raises the question, if you're online and your words or actions cause harm in a specific state, can you be sued there, even if you never physically set foot in that state?
Right. It's a really interesting question. This case really shows how vulnerable we can be in this digital age. Even something as simple as a fall at a party can spiral into this really complex web of accusations and legal battles.
It's true.
Now, the lawsuit claims that one of the defendants, Thuong Doan, also known as Doan Thuong, played a particularly active role in this online campaign.
Okay.
What specifically are they alleging she did?
So the lawsuit alleges that Doan used both Facebook and her own YouTube channel to spread this defamatory content about Williams and his wife. And they claim she encouraged her followers to actually disparage the couple and put their lives in danger.
Yeah.
It's a pretty serious allegation.
And they've included screenshots of specific Facebook posts and YouTube videos as evidence.
Yeah.
It seems like she really didn't hold back. In one post, she's even referring to Williams as immoral, like a stinky whore, and accuses him of trying to buy fame by sponsoring Dam Vin Hung's shows. So it sounds like they're arguing that these statements go beyond just expressing an opinion and actually cross that line into defamation.
Yeah, it appears the lawsuit is claiming that she was actually presenting her opinions as facts.
Okay.
Potentially causing serious harm to Williams's reputation. And because these statements were published online, where they could be seen by, potentially a huge audience, the damage could be even greater.
They're also claiming that she spread false information, alleging that Williams financially cheated on his wife by not including her name on the deed to their house.
Oh, wow.
And the lawsuit emphasizes that Doan and a guest on her live stream even went so far as to threaten Williams' wife, saying that they would verbally curse her if she ever tried to claim the house. So they're alleging that these statements weren't just defamatory, but were also intentionally false and misleading, designed to paint Williams in this really negative light.
Yeah, they're really building a case that Doan was a driving force behind this online campaign, using her platform to spread this damaging information.
Now, similar to the argument they're making about Pham, they're also claiming that even though Doan lives outside of Texas, the court should still have jurisdiction over her because of these online activities targeting Texas residents. Do you think they have a strong case there?
Well, it's going to come down to whether the court believes Doan intentionally used these online platforms to engage with a Texas audience to a significant degree.
Okay.
The lawsuit claims they have evidence of direct interactions with Texas residents, including comments, messages, mentions of Texas during live streams.
Right.
So if the court finds that those interactions are substantial enough, it could establish jurisdiction in Texas.
So again, another instance of how this case could really set a precedent for how we handle online behavior in jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
Now let's move on to another defendant named in the lawsuit.
Okay.
Thuong Nguyen, also known as Doan Nguyen. What's his alleged role in all of this?
So Thuong Nguyen is particularly interesting because he allegedly admitted to signing a non-disclosure agreement with Dam Vinh Hung regarding the details of the lawsuit between Williams and Hung. But then he went online and made all of these public statements about the case, allegedly violating that agreement.
So he was legally bound to keep certain information confidential, but then he went online and talked about it anyway.
That's what they're alleging, yes. And they're also saying that his statements weren't just a breach of contract, but that they were also defamatory and designed to hurt Williams's reputation.
So he could be in hot water on multiple fronts here.
Yeah.
He could face consequences for breaking the non-disclosure agreement and for defamation.
Exactly.
If the court finds that his statements were false and damaging, it's a very complex situation.
It is.
The lawsuit claims that Thuong Nguyen made some pretty harsh statements about Williams and his wife, calling them true Satans, and they're arguing that because Williams was raised in a Christian family, with a pastor father, this statement was intended to be especially hurtful and damaging.
Yeah, it seems like they're trying to show that Thuong Nguyen's statements weren't just opinions, but they were calculated to attack Williams's character and his morality and cause him this emotional distress.
They're also alleging that he spread false information about the gathering at Williams's house, claiming that it was a commercial event where tickets were sold. However, the invitation to the event, which they included as evidence, contradicts that claim, clearly stating that it was a party hosted by Williams and his wife.
So they're pointing to this inconsistency to highlight the fact that Thuong Nguyen was deliberately misrepresenting the event to paint Williams in a negative light.
It's a reminder that online, information can spread so quickly, and it can be hard to figure out what's actually true.
It really can.
Now, unlike Pham and Doan, Thuong Nguyen is a Texas resident, so there's no question about jurisdiction in his case.
That's right. The court automatically has jurisdiction over him, which makes this whole situation, especially with that alleged breach of the NDA, even more legally complex.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the final defendant named in the lawsuit, Nguyen Ta. What's her alleged involvement in all of this?
So the lawsuit claims that Nguyen posted these defamatory statements about Williams and his wife on Derek Pham's and Thuong Doan's Facebook pages.
Okay.
So similar to the other defendants, she's being accused of making these accusations without evidence and using this really derogatory language.
So she may not have been creating her own content, but she was participating in the conversation online, adding to the negativity directed at Williams and his wife.
That's right. They're saying that her comments, even though they were posted on other people's pages, still played a role in this alleged coordinated campaign to defame Williams.
And like Thuong Nguyen, Nguyen Ta is also a Texas resident, so the court's jurisdiction over her is clear.
Yep.
So it seems like Williams is fighting this on two fronts here.
Yeah.
He has to prove that the defendant's actions were actually defamatory and harassing, and he has to convince the court that it even has the authority to hear the case in the first place.
That's right, especially regarding Pham and Doan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This case really hinges on proving intent.
It does.
If the defendants can convince the court that they were just expressing their opinions, they might have a stronger defense. But if Williams can demonstrate that their actions were deliberate and coordinated to harm him, then the court might be more likely to rule in his favor.
Yeah, it's a very interesting legal battle. And it raises a lot of questions about how we think about online accountability.
Right.
And the legal boundaries of online behavior.
Well, before we dive into the specifics of the legal strategies being used, let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll explore what Williams is hoping to achieve with this lawsuit.
Okay.
And the potential impact it could have on the future of online speech.
Sounds good.
This case really digs into some complicated issues about online behavior and the law.
Yeah.
As we keep going with this deep dive, let's take a look at the legal strategies that Williams' legal team is using.
It looks like they're taking a multi-pronged approach based on the documents that you've provided. They're not just focusing on the statements that were made, but on the context of cyber harassment.
Right.
And the intent behind those actions.
It's like they're making the case that this wasn't just a handful of comments. It was a planned-out campaign to hurt his reputation.
Exactly. And their use of that term cyber harassment is interesting. Defamation focuses on false statements, but cyber harassment has a wider range of online behaviors designed to harass or intimidate or cause distress.
So even if some statements aren't technically defamation, they could still be considered part of this cyber harassment.
Exactly. They're arguing that the defendants used a bunch of different tactics like personal attacks, encouraging others to join in,
Right.
and even direct threats, all to create this hostile online environment for Williams and his wife.
It sounds like they're casting a wide net to get all of these actions that were taken online
Right.
that might have contributed to the harm that Williams is saying he experienced. They're even saying the defendants hacked into his wife's Facebook account to post this stuff.
If that's true, that would be a serious escalation.
Right.
It would show that they just don't care about privacy or legal boundaries.
The lawsuit also talks about how emotionally distressed he says he is because of all this.
Yeah.
Talking about fear, anxiety, damage to his reputation, relationships.
Yeah.
They're trying to paint a picture of the impact this has had on him.
They are. They're really trying to bring in the human element of this online harassment.
It's a good reminder that what happens online has very real consequences offline. Now, in addition to arguing that the court has jurisdiction over all four of these defendants, Williams is also asking for specific remedies.
Okay.
One is a temporary injunction. Can you explain what that is and why he would want one?
Sure. So a temporary injunction is a court order
Go.
that requires someone to either do something or stop doing something.
Okay.
In this case, Williams wants the court to tell the defendants to stop posting about him while the case is being decided.
So he's basically asking the court to silence them during the whole thing.
Yeah, basically. Courts don't love to restrict speech, but sometimes they will when there's a high chance of ongoing harm.
Okay.
They'll issue a temporary injunction to protect the person who is suing. So his legal team is arguing that this is causing real damage to his reputation.
Got it.
And making a hostile environment for him and his family.
It sounds like they're making a case that they need to prevent future harm as well, not just past harm.
Exactly. They're saying we need to keep things as they are right now and prevent further damage while the court looks at the case.
Now, besides the temporary injunction, he's also seeking monetary damages. What does that mean exactly? And what kind of damages could he get if he wins this thing?
When a court awards monetary damages, they're ordering the defendant to pay the plaintiff money to make up for the harm they suffered.
Okay.
So in defamation cases like this, you can get damages for lots of things. Damage to reputation, lost income, emotional distress.
So if the court rules for Williams, the defendants could be ordered to pay him a lot of money.
They could. There's also something called punitive damages, which are meant to punish the defendant for what they did and stop them from doing it again.
It sounds like he's looking to stop this from happening again and make them pay for what he says they did.
Right. He wants relief now and consequences in the long term.
Now, you mentioned that this case really hinges on proving intent. How would they go about proving that they did this intentionally to hurt his reputation?
They'll need to present evidence that shows that the defendants knew, or should have known, that their statements were false and that they were trying to hurt Williams.
How would they prove that?
It would probably involve a few things.
Okay.
First, they'll look at the statements themselves.
Right.
Are they false? Are they presented in a way that suggests malice?
Okay.
Or that they didn't care about the truth? Second, they'll look at the context. Were they said during heated online exchanges? Were they part of a larger pattern of harassment?
Yeah.
Third, they might look at any communication between the defendants, like private messages or emails, to see if they talked about their intentions.
Okay.
or if they were working together.
It's like they're putting a puzzle together to show what their motives were.
Yeah. It's not always easier to prove intent online, but if they can make a strong enough case, it will help Williams' chances of winning.
This case really shows how hard it can be to apply our traditional legal ideas to the digital world.
It does. This is a new area of law, and cases like this one are really pushing the boundaries. The result could change how we think about online speech and accountability for years to come.
You mentioned that they're relying heavily on the minimum contacts argument to get jurisdiction over Pham and Doan, who live out of state. They're also using something called the conspiracy theory of jurisdiction. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah.
And how it works here?
The conspiracy theory of jurisdiction basically says a court can have power over someone who lives out of state.
Okay.
If they conspired with others to do something wrong within the state.
So even if they never went to Texas?
Yeah.
They could still be under the jurisdiction of the Texas courts.
Exactly. If you're part of a conspiracy, you're responsible for what your co-conspirators do.
Okay.
Even if you didn't do it yourself.
So in this case, they're saying that Pham and Doan conspired with Thuong, Nguyen, and Nuta, who do live in Texas, to do this to Williams. They're using their online interactions.
Right.
And the shared content as proof of this plan.
It's a bold move. And it raises some interesting questions. If the court agrees with them, it could change how we think about online accountability and how far the law can reach online.
It's like the internet itself can be where a conspiracy happens.
Right.
Where people can get together from all over the place to plan to do something harmful.
It really does highlight the need to understand how legal principles work in these online spaces.
Now, have any of the defendants responded to the lawsuit yet? What are they saying in their defense?
Yes. It looks like Pham and Doan have both filed motions to dismiss the case. They're challenging whether the Texas court even has the power over them.
Okay.
They're saying that their online activities don't mean they have enough minimum contacts with the state.
So they're basically saying that just because they have an online audience in Texas and interact with people there online, it doesn't mean they can be sued in Texas.
Exactly. They want a stricter understanding of jurisdiction, one that's tied more to physical presence and their business operations.
So it sounds like a big part of Williams' case is going to be proving that they were targeting Texas residents specifically.
You got it. They have to convince the court that they meant to direct their actions at a Texas audience and that those actions caused harm in Texas.
This case is a great example of how tough it is to apply our legal system to the digital age.
It is, especially since geographic boundaries aren't as clear as they used to be.
Now, I know we're getting into the legal parts here, but it's important to remember that there are real people involved. And they're being affected by what's happening.
That's true. This isn't just a legal battle.
Yeah.
This is a human story. Williams is saying that he's been threatened, insulted, and accused of things that make him fear for his safety and his family's safety.
The lawsuit talks about how emotionally draining this has been on him, the damage to his reputation,
right?
His relationships. It's a reminder that words can really hurt people.
They can, especially when social media amplifies them.
And it's not just Williams who has been affected. The lawsuit says that the defendants also targeted his wife, his kids, and his business associates. It really shows how online harassment can affect more than just the person it's directed at.
It can create fear and anxiety for everyone around them, too.
It's sad that online harassment can have such a huge impact offline.
It really is.
Now, as we move forward, let's think about how this case could affect online discussion in the future.
Okay.
This isn't just one person's legal battle.
Right.
It's a reflection of how society's changing and how the law and the internet relate to each other.
Exactly. This case is pushing the boundaries of legal precedent, and it's making the courts really consider how online behavior and its real-world effects.
One of the big things here is figuring out where we separate free speech from harmful online conduct. We have the right to say what we think, but that doesn't mean we can defame people or harass them or spread harmful misinformation.
Right. This case is really pushing the limits of those protections. It's making us think about how to protect people from online harm while also protecting free speech.
It's a tough balance.
It really is.
And one that the courts are having to figure out more and more these days.
Yes. And the outcome of this case could change how future online speech cases are decided.
Okay.
It might even influence how social media companies handle content moderation and their community standards.
It's a reminder that the internet isn't a lawless place.
It's not.
There are rules, both legal and ethical, and we have to be aware of those and follow them.
This case really highlights the need for education and awareness when it comes to online harassment and defamation.
Yeah.
We need to teach people how to be safe and responsible online.
Right.
That means understanding their rights,
Okay.
knowing how to spot and report harmful content, and just being careful about what they say and do online.
So it's about creating a culture of respect and making sure people are responsible for what they do online.
Exactly. It's about making the internet a better place where people feel safe to express themselves without being harassed or abused.
Now, you said earlier that Pham and Doan filed motions to dismiss.
Yes.
What are their main arguments?
Their main argument is that the court in Texas doesn't have power over them.
Okay.
They're saying that their online activities don't count as enough minimum contacts with Texas.
So basically they're saying that just because they have an audience and interact with people online in Texas doesn't mean they can be sued there.
That's right. They want a more traditional approach to jurisdiction,
Okay.
one that focuses more on physical presence and where they do business. They're saying that having an audience or talking to people online in Texas isn't enough to give the court jurisdiction over them.
So it seems like proving that they were specifically targeting Texas residents is going to be very important for Williams's case.
It will be. They're going to have to convince the court that they intentionally targeted a Texas audience and that their actions caused harm in Texas.
This case really shows how hard it is to apply our traditional legal ideas to the digital age.
It does. It's a really interesting legal fight.
Yeah.
That could change how we think about accountability online and how far the law can reach in the digital world.
It's a debate that's likely to continue as more and more of our lives are lived online.
Definitely.
Now, I want to talk about something else that's important in this case. The idea of cyber harassment.
Right.
This isn't just about defamation.
Yeah.
It's about how they allegedly used online platforms to intimidate, threaten, and harm Williams and his family. The lawsuit goes into detail about how the defendants supposedly use these platforms to make things hostile for Williams and his wife.
It does.
It's a reminder that these platforms can be used as weapons
They can.
to scare and silence people.
The lawsuit talks about direct threats, personal attacks, encouraging others to harass, hacking, and impersonation. They're saying that this was all part of a plan to hurt Williams.
They're saying it was coordinated and sustained.
Right. They were trying to hurt him emotionally and make him scared.
The lawsuit doesn't just talk about the legal definitions.
Yeah.
It also focuses on the real effects of cyber harassment and how badly it can hurt people's lives.
It really highlights the need for more awareness about cyber harassment and the consequences it can have.
It's not just a problem for celebrities.
No.
It can happen to anyone who uses the internet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This case is a reminder that our actions online have real consequences.
Right.
And we all need to use these platforms responsibly and respectfully.
Now, let's talk about defamation.
Okay.
The lawsuit says the defendants are liable for both libel and slander per se.
Yeah.
Can you break down what those mean and how they apply here?
Sure. Defamation means hurting someone's reputation by making false statements about them.
Okay.
Libel and slander are two types of defamation.
Okay.
Libel is written defamation.
Okay.
Slander is spoken.
And what does per se mean?
Per se means by itself.
Okay.
In defamation law, libel per se means statements that are so obviously harmful to someone's reputation that they are automatically assumed to be defamatory.
Okay.
So Williams doesn't have to prove that he was actually harmed by the statements. The law says damage was done simply because the statements were made.
So what types of statements are usually considered libel per se?
There are a few categories. Statements that accuse someone of committing a crime, say someone has a bad disease, or say someone is incompetent or unethical in their job.
Okay.
Or claim that they've done something seriously wrong sexually.
And it sounds like Williams is arguing that the statements made about him fall into some of those categories.
Exactly. He's saying they accused him of insurance fraud, being bad at his job, and serious moral failings. All of those could count as libel per se.
It sounds like his team is being careful to make their case fit the rules of defamation law.
They are. They're laying out their case carefully, giving specific examples of the statements and explaining how they are libel per se.
Now, we've talked about defamation and cyber harassment.
Right.
But the lawsuit also says they violated his privacy. Can you tell us more about that?
The lawsuit focuses on how they allegedly made public private facts about Williams and his family.
Okay.
That's what they're basing that claim on.
For example, they're claiming that Pham and Doan falsely accused Williams of financial infidelity.
Right.
Saying that he didn't put his wife's name on the deed to their house to cheat her.
Exactly. And they're saying that those claims about his marriage and finances weren't true at all.
Right.
And were meant to make him look bad. It caused him and his wife a lot of distress.
So they're saying that the defendants used private information about him and his family as a weapon in this harassment campaign.
Yes. This part of the lawsuit really highlights the importance of data privacy and how careful we need to be about who we share information with.
Right. The internet is a public place, and information shared online can last forever, even if it's corrected or taken down.
It's a good reminder to be more aware of our digital privacy and the possible risks of sharing personal information online.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to discuss the legal strategies they're using. They have a few challenges in this case, like the jurisdiction over those two defendants who live out of state, and the fact that it's hard to prove defamation and cyber harassment online. How are they trying to deal with those challenges?
It looks like they're doing a few things. First, they've been really thorough in documenting everything.
Okay.
All the interactions between the defendants and people in Texas.
Okay.
They've got social media comments, mentions in live streams, even attempts to organize protests in Texas.
And also, they knew this challenge was coming.
Right.
And they were already preparing for it.
They're really covering all their bases when it comes to proving those minimum contacts, which are so important for jurisdiction over those living outside Texas.
And their use of the conspiracy theory of jurisdiction is interesting, too. They're basically saying that even those living outside Texas were in on this plan to hurt Williams.
Exactly. And therefore, they should be under Texas law.
It could really change how we think about jurisdiction online.
It could.
Another thing they're doing is focusing on building a strong case for defamation and harassment.
Yes. They've gathered tons of evidence. Screenshots, transcripts, audio recordings, and detailed explanations of how everything fits the legal definitions.
So they're not just throwing around fancy legal words. They're showing how those words connect to the actual things the defendants did.
Exactly. They're telling a story with the evidence, showing that there was a plan to defame and harass.
And they're using the defendants' own words and actions to do it.
They are. It's a really smart approach. They're making it much harder for the defendants to just dismiss the accusations.
And their request for a temporary injunction also seems strategic. By asking the court to stop the alleged defamation and harassment right away. They're showing they want to protect Williams now, not later.
Exactly. They're saying this is urgent.
Yeah.
And we need the court to step in now before more damage is done.
So overall, Williams' legal team is being very strategic and aggressive.
They are. They're using their legal expertise and paying close attention to every detail to build their case.
And they're working hard to protect their client from more harm.
It really shows how important it is to have a strong legal team.
It does. Now, I want to bring up something that's been on my mind. It seems like emotions are really high here, especially from the defendants. They're really passionate about defending Dam Vin Hung, and they see him as the victim. They're using the internet to support him and criticize those they think have wronged him.
I understand their passion, and it's important to acknowledge that they believe they're doing the right thing. But the law is clear. You can't defame or harass someone, even if you're trying to defend someone you care about.
There's a difference between giving your opinion and doing something harmful.
Exactly. And the lawsuit says that the defendants crossed that line.
It's a reminder that words can have a big impact online. We have to be careful about what we say and make sure we're being respectful of other people's rights.
It's also important to remember that the internet can be an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Where false information and harmful narratives can take hold easily.
It's really important to be critical of what we see online and think about where it's coming from and why it's being shared.
Being able to evaluate information you see online is so crucial.
Now, before we wrap up this part, I want to come back to the internet and jurisdiction. This case depends on the idea that what you do online, even if it's from outside Texas, can have consequences in Texas.
Right.
And therefore, it should be under Texas law. It's a really interesting legal debate that could change how we think about responsibility online.
It is. This case really shows that we need to understand how jurisdiction works online.
Yeah.
The old way of thinking about jurisdiction, which was based on physical location, isn't really working anymore. The internet has changed everything. People can interact and hurt each other across borders so easily.
The internet has made the world smaller.
It has.
Making it easier to connect, but also easier to hurt each other.
And the legal system is trying to keep up with these changes.
Right.
This case
We move on to discuss how this might impact Dam Vinh Hung's reputation. I want to bring up the issue of cyber harassment again. This case isn't just about defamation.
Right.
It's also about how the defendants allegedly use these platforms to create a hostile environment for Williams and his family. The lawsuit describes all the ways cyber harassment can happen online.
It's a reminder of how these platforms can be used to intimidate, control, and silence people.
The lawsuit talks about direct threats, personal attacks, urging others to harass, hacking, and impersonation as part of what they did to Williams.
Right. They're saying it was a coordinated and sustained effort to use the internet to cause psychological harm and make Williams and his family feel unsafe.
And the lawsuit doesn't just focus on the legal side of things.
Yeah.
It talks about the real emotional distress and the real-world consequences of cyber harassment.
It does. It's a reminder that what we do online can have a huge impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
And we all need to use these platforms in a responsible and ethical way.
Now, besides defamation and cyber harassment, the lawsuit also claims they invaded his privacy. How are they making that claim?
They're focusing on the fact that the defendants allegedly shared private information about Williams and his family.
Okay.
That's the basis of that part of the lawsuit.
So, for instance, they're saying that Pham and Doan falsely accused him of financial infidelity, saying he didn't put his wife's name on the house deed to cheat her.
Exactly. And they're arguing that those claims about his marriage and money weren't true.
Okay.
And were meant to make him look bad.
Okay.
This caused both Williams and his wife a lot of distress.
So they're saying that the defendants used this private information as a weapon in their harassment campaign.
That's right.
This part of the lawsuit really shows how important it is to protect our personal information online.
It does.
We need to be careful about what we share and who we share it with because it can be used against us.
Absolutely.
It's a wake-up call to think more about our digital privacy and how to protect ourselves online.
It is. We need to be more aware of the potential risks of sharing personal information.
Okay. Now let's talk about the legal strategies Williams' team is using.
Sure.
They're facing a few hurdles in this case, like proving jurisdiction over the defendants who live out of state, and the difficulties of proving defamation and cyber harassment online. How are they trying to overcome these challenges?
It seems like they're taking a multifaceted approach based on the documents you've given me.
Okay.
First, they've been very careful about documenting every single interaction between the defendants and people who live in Texas. This includes social media comments, things said during live streams, even efforts to get protests going in Texas.
It seems like they were expecting this jurisdiction issue to come up.
Yeah, it does.
And they were already getting ready for it.
They're not leaving anything to chance. They want to make sure they have enough evidence to prove those minimum contacts, which are so important when you're trying to establish jurisdiction over people who don't live in Texas.
And using the conspiracy theory of jurisdiction is an interesting tactic as well. They're basically arguing that even if someone doesn't live in Texas, if they were part of a plan to hurt Williams, then they should be under Texas law.
Exactly. It's a bold move that could potentially expand how we traditionally think about jurisdiction, especially when it comes to online activities.
Another important part of their approach seems to be focusing on building a very strong case for defamation and harassment.
Right. They've collected a lot of evidence.
Yeah.
Screenshots, transcripts of live streams, audio recordings, and they've provided detailed explanations of how the things the defendants did meet the legal definitions.
So they're not just throwing legal terms around.
No, they're not.
They're actually connecting those terms to specific examples of what the defendants did.
Exactly. They're creating a compelling narrative using the evidence.
Right.
It's like they're telling a story about a coordinated campaign of defamation and harassment.
Yeah.
And they're using the defendant's own words and actions to tell that story.
It's really smart.
It is. They're making it much harder for the defendants to simply brush off the accusations.
And their decision to request a temporary injunction also seems very strategic.
It does.
They're asking the court to stop the alleged defamation and harassment immediately.
Yeah.
Which shows that they're really concerned about protecting Williams now, not just waiting for the lawsuit to play out.
Exactly. They're emphasizing that this is an urgent situation and that waiting could cause further harm to Williams's reputation and well-being.
It's like they're acknowledging that the damage is ongoing.
Yeah.
And that immediate action is needed to stop it.
Well, right. They're not willing to wait and see what happens.
So overall, it seems like Williams's legal team is being very aggressive in this case.
They are. They're combining their legal knowledge with a meticulous approach to detail.
Yeah.
They're building a strong case against the defendants and trying to get help for their client as quickly as possible.
It really highlights the importance of having a skilled legal team on your side.
Absolutely. In cases like this, having a good lawyer can make a huge difference.
Now, I want to address something that's been on my mind as we've been discussing this. It's clear that there are strong emotions involved here, especially on the side of the defendants. They're very passionate about defending Dam Vinh Hung, and they truly believe that he's the victim in this situation. They're using their online platforms to speak up for him and criticize anyone they believe has treated him unfairly.
I understand their passion, and I think it's important to acknowledge that they believe they're fighting for what they think is right.
Yeah.
However, even if you're trying to defend someone you care about, you can't break the law. You can't defame someone or harass them.
Exactly. There's a line you can't cross. And the lawsuit is arguing that they went too far.
Right. This case is a reminder that we all have to.
They've included screenshots of Facebook posts, YouTube comments, transcripts of live streams, and even audio recordings of threatening voicemail messages. It's a mountain of evidence, and it seems like they're leaving no stone unturned in their effort to build a strong case.
Yeah, it's very thorough and well documented. It looks like they were thinking ahead about possible challenges and trying to get out in front of them.
Their attention to detail is impressive. For example, they've even included 21 vulgar voicemails that Williams' lawyer got after sending cease and desist letters to 2 of the defendants. It really shows how serious they are about building a solid case.
It definitely shows how dedicated they are to building a strong case. They're creating a very clear record of everything, documenting each step of the process.
It's strategic and shows how seriously they're taking this.
Yeah, they're not leaving anything to chance. They're trying to convince the court that the defendants were intentional and that they meant to cause harm.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into this case, I want to ask you, expert speaker, and our listeners, what do you think the bigger implications of this case could be? How could it change how we talk to each other online and how we're held accountable in the digital age? What are some of the areas where you think it could have a lasting impact?
First, it could change how courts deal with online defamation and harassment cases, especially when it comes to jurisdiction. The decision on whether the Texas court has power over the defendants who live out of state could lead to a broader understanding of what minimum contacts means online.
So if the court agrees with Williams and says that those defendants can be sued in Texas because of what they did online, targeting Texas residents, it could mean it's easier for people to sue for online harms in states where they have a big online audience, even if the people they're suing don't actually live there.
Exactly. It could have a big impact on how these cases are handled, making people more careful about what they do online, because they could be held responsible in more places.
So it would mean people and businesses would have to be much more careful about what they do online, knowing they could be held accountable in more places.
That's right. It really highlights how important it is to understand the legal side of what we do online and how far-reaching our actions can be.
What are some other areas where this case could make a difference?
Another big area is the whole debate about free speech online. This case makes us think about where free speech ends and harmful behavior begins in the digital world. The First Amendment gives us the right to express our opinions, even if they're unpopular.
Right.
But it doesn't mean we can say anything we want. We can't defame people, harass them, or spread lies that hurt people.
This case really makes us think about those boundaries in the online world, where information can travel so fast and have a lasting impact.
It does. The court's decision could help to make those boundaries clearer and influence how social media companies moderate content and enforce their rules.
It's a good reminder that freedom of speech comes with responsibility, especially online, where our words can be seen by so many people and have long-lasting effects. Are there any other potential implications you see?
This case also reminds us how vulnerable our personal information is online.
Right.
We need to be more aware of our digital privacy and how to protect our data.
The fact that they're talking about doxing, hacking, and sharing private financial information is really concerning. It shows how easy it is for people to get and misuse our personal information online.
It does. This case should make us all think about how we protect our privacy in this digital world.
It's a reminder that what we share online can be used against us. Even things we think are harmless can come back to hurt us later.
That's right. We need to think carefully about what we put online and how it could affect our privacy and reputation.
Well, I think we've covered a lot in our deep dive into this case. It brings up a lot of important issues about online speech, harassment, privacy, and how the law is trying to keep up with the internet. It's a reminder that the digital world isn't a place without rules.
Exactly. We all have a responsibility to understand the rules, both the legal ones and the ethical ones, and we have to act accordingly.
It's about being respectful online and being accountable for what we do and say. We all have a role to play in making the internet a safer and more inclusive place.
I agree. This case is a wake-up call. What we do online matters.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something about online defamation and harassment and the challenges we face in this digital age. We'll keep an eye on this case and let you know what happens. Until then, stay curious.